I talk about the politics of fiber arts here on this channel, and something that comes up a lot is identity politics versus identity reductionism. Identity politics is understanding that your gender, ethnicity, even things like age and profession can affect your privilege and your values and worldview. And you need to consider nuance and intersectionality, otherwise you fall into identity reductionism, whereby you let any one asset of your identity dictate everything about you and everything about others of that same identity. I'm very frustrated by the tendency to immediately berate somebody because of one thing that they said. Maybe they like half subconsciously name drop a company that just happens to be problematic, or blindly defending somebody who's genuinely a shitty person just because they are queer or POC or like a small business owner. And this happens so much in online conversations. You may know me for my video on how being a man in a female dominated space, such as the knitting community, does not automatically make you a feminist, and it does not make all of your actions suddenly radical and subversive. Your words and actions can still be harmful. You still need to be politically informed and make an active effort to support your marginalized peers. And you need to be aware that your being a minority in a certain space does not actually shed you of your privilege, even when you're sitting within that space. But people will let their guard down around you and even put you on a pedestal, making it harder for you to be held accountable or realize your own subconscious biases. And when you attract a network of individuals who see you as a safe space, suddenly acting in ways that contradict your values, or even in ways that contradict the values that people assume you have, can cause a lot of fear and disappointment and even anger and disgust. That's why staying informed and responding to criticism is for your own good. And I say this as somebody who already attracted an audience of a certain political orientation on this channel just by virtue of being who I am and being in this niche before I started talking overtly about politics. Because I'm an AFAB person of color, a lot of people hear me talking about men on the internet and will just be like, oh, well, this is just misandry, clearly. You must hate men because of who you are. Because women of color hate cis white men, right? That is also identity reductionism. All the media I'm going to show today is public material. I'm expressing my personal opinion. Nothing in this video qualifies as illegal activity under UK law or Dutch civil code. A cease and desist is not legally binding and is not protected by non-disclosure. But something that does warrant a harassment charge is personal attack in response to public criticism, so keep that in mind today. You may already know what I'm about to talk about. Stephen West is like the knitting PewDiePie. He's not Beyonce level famous, but he's a big name. I'm a crocheter who barely knits, and I know of him. He's been designing knit patterns over a decade under West Knits. He owns a yarn brand called West Wool, and he's a co-founder of the yarn and knitting supply boutique Stephen and Penelope in Amsterdam. Something that he hosts are knit-alongs, abbreviated KAL, CAL. Knit-alongs are a really fun way to experience the community aspect of knitting. Several times a year, West Knits and Stephen and Penelope host events where knitters from around the world are invited to join in and knit something together. How it works is they do recurring reveals of a knitting pattern, like bit by bit, over the course of a couple weeks, so the community can follow along by making it together in real time. Some of these are MCALs, mystery knit-alongs, where the community doesn't know what the pattern is until they've made it. Stephen West is also an openly gay man. I personally think it's plausible that many people see him as a safe space. Beyond just his identity, his business appears very queer-friendly. He has very diverse staff. On their shop website, it states they really strive for inclusivity. I'm a customer of the shop myself, and I can attest their staff are very friendly and knowledgeable. It seems they're very intentional with the recruiting process. Stephen's knitting designs are quite flamboyant and eccentric. I mean, I think they're stunning. You know, this isn't somebody I would consider insecure about his masculinity either, but this is all speculation. I don't know Stephen personally, but you can find videos of Stephen speaking online, and he seems like a lovely person. I mean, as far as knowing somebody to the extent that you can know somebody by virtue of just following their career online, I think there's much you can deduce about him. He's been in the knitting industry since 2009. He's had a few controversies in the past, which I think is completely natural by virtue of being an influencer. Nobody's perfect. And he's allegedly handled them, or at least recovered from them, fairly well. A couple years ago, I believe 2023, he did a mystery knit-along that people soon noticed had a very unfortunate geometric pattern that looked like a swastika. And Stephen quickly responded saying it was unintentional, and he was very prompt with changing the design. That drama was covered by Aspen in the Moment, you can click here to watch their video. This situation actually gained Steven a lot of new fans. While most people were commending him for his swift and empathetic response, a creator called Neil James back then made fun of Steven for crumbling before the woke mob. Neil also accused the people who criticized Steven for the design of just wanting to tear down a successful designer, and went out of his way to knit the original, unmodified version, coining it the swastika with a capital SW, presumably for Steven West, and KAL at the end for knit along. Neil is the person behind Blocked Magazine, which is a right-wing knitting magazine. Neil's Instagram is filled with very far-right conservative rhetoric. He calls himself Knitler on his Instagram bio, for instance, which is short for Knitting Hitler. Neil is also notorious for sending followers after any creator who publicly criticizes him, especially if that creator is queer or POC or plus size. So he's gone after Aspen in the Moment for making that drama video, for instance. He's also harassed Autumn, who is the founder of Size Inclusive Collective, for several years now. Reminder, again, that personal attack in response to public criticism is harassment. It legally qualifies as harassment. This video is not made to elicit any more harassment. Usually I credit the people who I feature in my videos, but for their safety this time I will be censoring their names. So to the creators who provided me with evidence and receipts, you know who you are, thank you, and thank you for understanding. So that was the drama that ensued a few years ago, but like I said, Steven was actually commended for his empathy and professionalism. Even despite the criticism from Neil, which he did not publicly react to as far as I know, it's unclear whether Steven himself actually saw anything that Neil posted about the MCAL, coining it swastika or anything like that. What I'm trying to say is there's quite a few context clues to reasonably declare, like, okay, Steven's a sound guy. He obviously puts a lot of care into his work and he listens to his community. So naturally, it came as a shock to Steven's fans when last Friday he was seen on a podcast hosted by none other than Neil James of Blocked Magazine. Just to put in perspective the nature of Neil's content, here's a screenshot from another episode where Neil was mocking Muslim women with a different guest. Very soon after, the news was posted to Craftsnark, and upon finding out about it, Steven's supporters took to his page to express how they felt about that collaboration. I'm done putting my trust in folks who don't know how to give a crap about others. Why would you do an interview with incredibly right-wing magazine? I'm disappointed to learn you would share your platform with someone that has harassed, bullied, and doxed marginalized makers and members of the fiber arts community. I had already decided to stop making your shawl patterns when I learned you sent a cease and desist letter to someone destashing a shawl they knit, but this makes it so I am sure I will never return. Hope the interview and your behavior the past year was worth it. So the cease and desist situation happened a few months ago when somebody was destashing a Westknits shawl from their closet, and they received this DM from Westknits saying the following: "Hi there, we are reaching out to you because while we love your enthusiasm for Westknits and enjoy seeing your beautiful creations, we regret to inform you that it is a copyright violation to sell knitted items created from Westknits patterns." That is not a copyright violation. The Westknits copyright printed at the bottom of each pattern reads, "Pattern for personal use only." This is not legally binding. This means that you are allowed to use the pattern for your own personal use only, and that all rights to distribution of and income generated from the pattern are reserved to Steven West. While you are welcome to knit or make a gift of your hand-knitted items made from Westknit patterns, selling these hand-knitted items, generating an income of any kind, and or distributing electronic and printed copies of it are all examples of violations of the copyright. They are not all examples of copyright violation. That is... Okay, I'll get into it later. Therefore, we kindly request that you please remove the listings for any items created from Westknits patterns. We apologize for any disappointment this may cause and welcome any questions you may have. This situation didn't pick up too much traction, but people were a bit appalled by the removal request issued to somebody not even commercially selling, not even illegally distributing a Westknits pattern, but destashing an already made physical item. Like posting it on like Vinted or Poshmark for a low price while cleaning out your closet. These terms are mentioned in the Westknits terms of service, but they are not legally binding. You are not legally forbidden to sell a finished product that you made following a pattern. This is just a common courtesy to the designer if the designer mentions that they would prefer you wouldn't do that, but legally you can. The only thing that is a copyright violation is a distribution of the pattern itself. So this is the only receipt that I managed to find, but allegedly Steven's team has sent out multiple cease and desist messages to other people who are also simply just selling old Westknit items. That was the cease and desist drama. So back to these comments, Stephen West actually responded to the very last one that I showed. Thanks for bringing this to my attention. I was unaware of the interviewer's posts and behavior prior to doing the interview, and I absolutely do not agree with their messaging or posts they have made, nor do I support their views. There's only a couple comments like this on the Westnitz and Stephen and Penelope Instagram pages because the comments were soon disabled. Shortly after, on the same day that the podcast was posted, Stephen posted a statement to his page. I participated in a YouTube live interview earlier today. I was unaware of the opinions and comments made by one of the hosts, including harmful posts and attacks on marginalized people in our crafting community. Those actions do not reflect my own opinions or values, and I apologize for using my platform to highlight this interviewer and not diligently looking into their posts and views, which absolutely do not align with my values. I have asked that they remove the interview content and posts. I have closed the comments as I do not want to spotlight them or allow my platform to aid in their harmful posts. I believe this statement was the last time the podcast was addressed, and within the same day, I think even within the same hour, I didn't keep record, but Westnitz and Stephen and Penelope continued with their regular content promoting their boutique, and that could have been the end of it. Unfortunately, his followers found it hard to believe that Stephen did not know about Neil's right-wing beliefs prior to doing this podcast. Many thought that he was pleading ignorance. I'm not here to declare whether Stephen was lying or not because I don't know. I'm just going to go through reasons as to why there's not a lot of plausible deniability. Firstly, recall the swastika drama back in 2023. Again, it's unclear whether Stephen actually knew what Neil had posted about the MCAL, like calling it a swastika and things like that. Aspen in the Moments video also received a significant amount of views, so there's a high chance that a couple people may have sent their video to Stephen. According to this Redditor, Neil also wrote about Stephen West in one of his magazine issues. I also did a little research this morning and had a leaf through some of the magazines to get a better handle on the topics covered. Lo and behold, there's an article in issue 10 entitled Dear Mr. West. So if anyone is in any doubt about Stephen West's knowledge of what he was agreeing to, you can dispel that notion right now. There's no way he could have been unaware. Secondly, Neil's political orientation is glaringly obvious. He wears it on his social media sleeve. Only a brief glance at his Instagram bio, and I think the redness would be palpable to anyone with basic political knowledge. The three speakers in this podcast episode were also tagging and chatting with each other on social media shortly after the episode was published, so it's plausible to suspect that Stephen at least clicked on Neil's profile. And just a reminder, Stephen is a big name. Just to put it into perspective, he has 350,000 followers on Instagram. Here's the follower count of some other designers in the industry that I personally know. I meant to say personally follow, not personally know. I am not personal friends with any of these big amazing influencers. I wish. I don't personally know them. Made in the Moment, 143k. Amazingish Grace, 199k. Stitched by Emma, 144k. Alexandria Massey, the girl who went viral multiple times, including for crocheting a tapestry of her birth control information sheet, has 274k. Admittedly, these are mostly crochet influencers since I'm a crocheter, but again, the fact that I'm mostly a crocheter and I still know who Stephen West is, I think that can attest to the size of his name. As we saw in the cease and desist drama, he's got staff, he's got a team of people working under him who have proven themselves able to scour the internet and issue cease and desist statements. As not only a designer, but also an influencer with a large, I would almost say cult following, and lots of public responsibility. It begs the question, why would Stephen consent to being on a podcast episode without doing any sort of background check on the host? Yikes. I mean, even if he didn't know himself, nobody on his team did either, and nobody thought to do even a cursory search. This kind of reminds me of someone else's poor searching skills. Either you looked and didn't care about what you saw, or you didn't actually look because you wouldn't care what you found anyway. In both cases, it's a complete lack of care for anyone but yourself. The bare minimum he should have done is checked out his socials before platforming him. It's really not difficult. Even if he didn't know, which seems unlikely, I can't imagine going on a show and not taking 5 minutes to find out what they're about. I had no idea who this Neil guy was, but I also wasn't doing a whole damn interview with him. I find it hard to believe that Stephen West didn't do a deep dive into who he was before doing a whole live with him. The apology could be sincere, but how do you not do your research before a YouTube live with someone like that? Stephen's large following also begs the question, why go on such a small podcast? Some people suspect that since Neil is based in the UK and it seems that Stephen's going to some UK markets and doing more self-promotion in the just British market in general, that it was for self-promotion to go on his podcast. But it's also a theory that just doesn't take hold because Neil's audience is so much smaller than Stephen's. There are much larger knitting companies, knitting influencers based in the UK than Neil. Also, the other guy has 800 YouTube subscribers. Why even go on this small channel if he's not a close personal friend. Am I seeing correctly that the YouTube channel he went on only has 400 subscribers? There's no way someone as huge as Stephen West goes on a tiny channel like this without vetting it at all. He had to know. Exactly, this is the behavior of a friend trying to help their smaller friend out. And if the intention is to support a smaller creator, surely that also warrants a background check on the smaller creator. The final reason as to why people don't believe that Stephen wasn't aware of who Neil James was prior to being a guest on his podcast is that the two men actually knew each other before the podcast episode. There is a vlog of the two of them hanging out at Textile in Manchester earlier this year. So it seemed that somewhere in the mix, Neil James also decided that Stephen was no longer a victim of the woke mob. Again, I'm not trying to declare whether or not Stephen actually knew about Neil's values. You don't necessarily discover somebody's political orientation just by virtue of hanging out with them. Apparently, since the podcast episode, Neil has gone private and deactivated a few of his pages, likely following the criticism that Stephen received. As an influencer myself, I do think it's plausible to expect an influencer to do some sort of background research before agreeing to a collaboration, a sponsorship. Some people were on my page like, oh, you're just gonna go through somebody's entire Instagram page like a stalker to find out what they're about before working with them. Well, yes, because I'm not gonna just blindly trust anyone, the fuck. But in this situation, it's not even as complex as that. It's a mere matter of reading an Instagram bio, especially not as a business owner. Like, I think if nothing else, there's a very strong selfish reason as to why at least your brand should have some basic integrity. And Westnitz up until this point has been doing what I think is more than basic or bare minimum in enforcing their missions and policies, going so far as sending multiple cease and desist to people who violated those policies. So notwithstanding the moral contradiction, it's still a surprising change in, administrative integrity, I guess you'd call it, which further gives rise to the suspicion that this isn't some like formal invitation that Neil issued to Stephen like via email or something, but perhaps a casual request as a friend, maybe even issued verbally in person, and then Stephen just like quickly agreed to it on the spot without further thought. It can take years of knowing somebody and hanging out with them before learning that your values don't actually align. Ugh, even if it was true, and it's not, I didn't know isn't a good defense. If someone is a prominent figure or wants to be prominent in a community, due diligence is a bare minimum for community care. Ignorance can be just as dangerous as malice. Ignorance can be just as dangerous as malice is very well said. I would go as far as saying that ignorance breeds malice. Why are people racist? Why are people prejudiced against a certain ethnicity? It's because they've never actually met enough people of that ethnicity and they refuse to, so they go off of stereotype and confirmation bias. The SciShow knitting video also received a lot of negative responses because of ignorance. It was a similar issue whereby not only one person but an entire team of producers, researchers, knitters failed to see the intersection between knitting and science and failed to recognize their own subconscious prejudice. What a damn shame. I thought he handled the issue with that knit-along with compassion and grace, but then he goes on their podcast, seems to fly in the face of what he said he stood for then. He'll get no more money from me. Sadly, I have several whips of his designs. I'm not sure what will become of them now. Honestly, the icky parasocial relationships in the knit world baffle me. I see it every week where someone who previously went scorched earth on a designer or dyer is suddenly besties with them, and I just don't get it. It speaks volumes of the moral compass for all involved. Anyone associated with blocked is an instant hard pass for me. Stephen already was anyway. But way to out yourself, I guess. And here is where identity reductionism comes in, and it gets painfully frustrating because a lot of those who were defending Stephen were saying, oh, y'all just don't want to see a gay man succeed. Y'all just want to tear down, like even Neil did this, like, oh, y'all just want to tear down this fiber arts designer, this niche business owner, like basically this person with a marginalized identity, therefore you're a bigot. I'm not trying to shame people who choose to continue supporting Stephen, but I think it's rather silly if your reason for supporting somebody is solely because they are gay, or a woman, or a person of color. In my humble opinion, I find that a very weak basis on which you decide whether someone is worth your support or not, when being gay, or even being a gay knitter, doesn't make you exempt from criticism. Frankly, I think too many gay individuals get away with being misogynistic because their remarks and actions just get written off as, oh, they're being a diva, they're being sassy, it's gay, it's a gay thing, it's okay if a gay person does it. I don't want my viewers to support me solely because I'm Asian or female. There is more to me than that. There is more to Stephen than his being gay. People like me are capable of being sexist and racist too. Another thing is we've been seeing Stephen succeed. The knitting community has been the reason for Stephen's success, giving Stephen grace. They're the ones buying his books, his yarns, his patterns, visiting his store. Even if his boutique, Stephen and Penelope in Amsterdam, were his only business, he would still be wildly successful because that place is thriving. I am not exaggerating when I say people flock to this little store from all over the world. And I commend him for that success, okay? I fucking wish I had an ounce of his success and creativity. I know people in the comments will defend them being like, oh, Lucy, you're just jealous and you just want to bring down this person because it's like less competition for you and you're just bitter that your crochet patterns are less successful. I would be lying if I said I didn't wish that I were that successful, okay? Stephen has achieved great things that I am yet to achieve. But I can also recognize that success comes with responsibility. It's not about tearing someone down. It's never about that. It's about accountability and awareness. Again, we need to consider intersectionality, layers of marginality and privilege, so as not to be reductionist. Being gay does not shed you of the privileges of being male, being white, being cis. Gay, cis, white men are the last members of the queer community who will be affected by right-wing violence. For a lot of creators, when they're invited on a podcast episode, their first thought is like, does this person want to harm me? Is this person trying to sabotage my success? Is this person going to call me a slur? So if you're able to just hop on a podcast episode without any second thought, without thinking like, well, is this person gonna like say some like transphobic shit, say some racist shit? That sort of ignorance is a privilege. I'm really not surprised by this. White queer men are our weakest link. Close comments to not spotlight them, but you're also then skirting away from letting people hold you accountable for your choice to be ignorant. Dude, to be so oblivious of the community they are supposedly a part of and not know the people who have caused so much harm to marginalized folks tells me everything I need to know about the privileges of not having to worry about right-wing violence. Must be nice, when so many of us, marginalized BIPOC folks, have pointed out the harm. But yeah, whatever. Sounds about white. I think this drama has been honestly a huge, much-needed paradigm shift for some people who prior to this were unable to fathom the idea that a queer person could make a mistake or oversight, let alone to this extent, as such a large influencer. And a weird part of me is glad that Neil James is getting attention because he is a perfect illustration of what most would consider an oxymoron. It is ironic to be a right-wing knitter, giving knitting's history. But it's not inherently contradictory, because knitting is not a political subculture, the way it is to be goth or punk. The internet has a tendency to treat way too many things as mutually exclusive, when in reality, multiple things can be simultaneously true, even if you don't like the way those combinations sound. And I suspect, honestly, that Neil James is just as frustrated as I am that most people would isolate the act of knitting alone and consider it as like this radical leftist act without placing it into any further context. The phrase knitting is resistance was getting thrown around a lot in the past few months. This goes for any activity, any hobby, any discipline. Just because of its history doesn't mean the people who practice it all of a sudden adopt a preconceived set of values. I am a pole dancer. Much of contemporary pole dance, the moves, the culture, the clothing, it's derived from sex workers, especially Black sex workers. But you'd be surprised by the amount of pole dancers who are vehemently anti-sex work, pole dancers who like to shame strippers. I used to work for a ride-sharing company and not one of those motherfuckers actually gave a shit about sustainability. And people are often like, oh, why do we need to ostracize each other because of clashing opinions? Like, why can't we just like, we don't need to cut people off over different opinions. And I find that genuinely pathetic. I'm not talking about Stephen anymore, I'm speaking in general. Like, please tell me you don't hang out with Black activists and white supremacists in the same week. Please don't tell me you hang out with a rape victim and the person who raped them. Like, please stand for something. Genuinely pick a side. Pick a side. Form a thought, form an opinion. You don't have to be hyper-vigilant. You don't have to carry out your values to perfection. Just don't be a vegan who eats steak. I'm not asking you to be like super non-inclusive and like refuse to hear out anybody who has a slightly different worldview than you. But like a queer-friendly influencer collaborating with a right-winger, like come on. Come on. I think everyone deserves to be treated fairly. I think certain groups of people are subhuman. Let's be best friends. Like, I'm sorry, what? You know how if you let Nazis sit in your bar, it's now a Nazi bar? Yeah. This is unrelated, but it is interesting that right-wingers, or at least American conservatives, who for some reason love my channel, they will automatically go into like leftist or democratic rhetoric in order to defend hateful behavior. Like, what are some MAGA values? Like, make America great again. That's literally like make America white again. Like, oh, hierarchy is natural. Some people are naturally superior to others. men are better than women, immigrants are criminals, people of color are less intelligent. And as soon as someone is like, I don't want to associate with MAGA because MAGA values include the oppression of my own rights, you are certain to hear MAGA conservatives preaching equality and inclusivity and crying about discrimination because how dare you exclude MAGA people. I will start treating MAGA as my equals the moment that MAGA starts treating trans people, immigrants, Muslims, people of color, women, people with disabilities as their equals, instead of only pulling this disingenuous cry for equality out of their ass as soon as they face an ounce of the discrimination that they treat others with. Y'all want tolerance and acceptance so bad, but you're not even willing to give it out to anybody who's slightly different to you. I'm not even saying like, oh, MAGA people, they don't deserve housing or social welfare and they should stay in their own country, the way they want to take those rights away from other people who are actually marginalized. Like, oh no, some little YouTuber living across the world doesn't want to be friends with you. Aww. Must be so hard. I'm sorry, but it was a great interview and all about Steven and his designs and creative process. I hope that one day the knitting community will stop eating our own and just knit. This hateful hive mentality is harmful and honestly manufactured and exhausting. Live and let live, man. This commenter, who I'm keeping anonymous, is a Trump supporter for the record. Again with this like, how dare you attack a fellow knitter, like just as if just because people do the same hobby suddenly they can do no wrong to each other. What does living and letting live mean to you? Doxing and harassing other creators, making fun of other religions, is that living and letting live? What about threatening legal action over lawful activity just because you don't like it? Is that living and letting live? What about saying that some people, such as Mexicans and Muslims, should go back to their own country? Not letting people live where they want, is that living and letting live? Or saying that women must stay at home and serve their husbands? Live and let live? It's always the like, oh, just knit, it's just knitting, just sit and knit. That kind of attitude is why knitting and fiber arts in general is still not taken seriously despite being such a rich discipline. This is why the community has unresolved issues, because they're being avoided in the name of, oh, let's put politics aside. This is why non-knitters look at us and look at the drama that we have and shake their heads. Whether it's Neil or Steven that you support or both of these men could have millions more followers, much larger, much more influential and successful platforms if knitting weren't constantly pushed to the peripheries and written off as something silly and boring and emasculating. When you look at this screenshot, I mean, you guys tell me, do you see two people who haven't yet learned enough about each other? Do you see two people who managed to work things out despite past feuds and differences? Two people abandoning their beliefs because they didn't benefit them at that moment? I mean, look at the pitfall it caused. Look at everyone boycotting West Knits. The shock and outrage. I'm not asking everybody to be a radical leftist. I just wish that we could stand by our values instead of switching up or not being thorough as soon as it's inconvenient, because it has more consequences than you think. This is gross, and I find it hard to believe that Steven is so privileged or naive that he wouldn't know who this person is and also wouldn't expect any blowback. The other thing I really don't understand is that Blockman came for Steven for backing down about the swastika and changing the pattern. I guess they've both forgiven each other. Also, the other person in the Manchester video has a profile photo of her and Posey Parker on her IG profile, so she's clearly a transphobe too. Steven and Penelope say they are a trans-led business. So even if this was just a photo with some unknown fans at an event, it is part of a pattern that shows who is more important and more disposable to Steven. There were a very, very small amount of people who came to Steven's defense. Unpopular opinion, I'm sure, but if somebody apologizes, I think it should be considered at face value. People make mistakes, and it's not very constructive if there is no path back for them after they accept responsibility. Should he have known? Maybe, but I'm not just going to assume he was lying about not knowing. The swastika controversy is well over 2 years old now, and I remember how huge it was, and Steven West apologized very genuinely and responded in the moment the best way he could. He changed the pattern on the fly and encouraged everyone to do the same. I don't expect him to have read and sussed out the source of everyone who criticized him on either side, and boy did he get shit from every side on that one. In this case, it seems to me that he may very well have thought he was helping out a smaller platform of people who are extremely complimentary of him to his face and had absolutely no idea of things said in the past or on other topics. Again, might he have done some more research? Sure. I bet he knows that now. I'm willing to give him a bit of grace on this one, especially since he has so quickly responded to it. But most people felt that Steven had been given enough grace leading up to this situation. Somebody responded to this comment: if he didn't have a whole team of people helping him out, I could believe this. But he has a team and not a single person vetted someone who asked him to come on their podcast. That's irresponsible at the least. And someone else said, so for me the thing is men, especially cis men, are forgiven so easily for not even doing the most basic research prior to going on a podcast. I mean, his reputation is his thing, right? It's his business. So maybe research a little? But if any woman or POC overslept and didn't research, burn them at the stake. This is tiresome. The original commenter replies, I guess I would say the solution to that is not to crucify cis men for their mistakes, but rather to advocate that we extend more grace to women and trans/non-binary people. Like, maybe we could not burn anyone at the stake? Why not? Men have been crucifying us for all of eternity. There is one more thing perhaps worth mentioning, which is the working conditions at Stephen and Penelope, as reported by a few former employees. I looked up some reviews on the Dutch Glassdoor site, which is this job recruiting site where employees can review businesses. Currently, these are the ratings for Stephen and Penelope out of 5. Diversity and inclusion, 2.9. Culture and values, 2.0. Wages and working conditions, 1.7. Work-life balance, 2.1. Career opportunities, 2.0. Senior management, 1.6. So very, very low ratings with an overall rating of 1.8 out of 5. There are only 5 reviews which read as follows. Pros, my immediate colleagues were all incredibly friendly, very international team, so Dutch isn't a problem. Working with people who share an interest so passionately is nice, no real dress code, no one ever made inappropriate comments. Cons, the directors have little to no trust in the team and will micromanage. Feedback on tasks is often vague. If I did something wrong, I wouldn't know about it until the task had been reassigned to someone else. Roles are constantly shifting around, making it incredibly difficult to know who to ask what. If you ask the wrong person a question, you get reprimanded. Constant changes make it incredibly difficult to settle into a role, especially for neurodivergent team members. Every time I took vacation, something had changed by the time I got back, making it difficult to relax. Staff turnover is incredibly high, and not because people are moving away. On more than one occasion, team members disappeared overnight, and everyone was expected not to gossip about it. Working from home is not an option unless directors really, really like you. They say this is a fairness issue, but both 2 owners and a manager work full-time from a different country. It just feels like they don't trust their team if they're not constantly watching them. If you take a certain percentage of sick days, your contract will not be renewed. This led to team members going into the office when they should have been resting, putting both themselves and other team members at risk. People working on the shop team aren't allowed to sit down as they work. I only worked there a handful of times, but this just feels cruel. Department names don't match the real world. The e-commerce department in the real world manages the online presence of a company. The e-commerce department at Stephen and Penelope fulfill orders and answer emails from customers. Advice: remove the sick day rule or adjust it. If someone isn't doing a task well, give feedback. Don't just take the task away without explaining why. Trust your team enough to work from home. Change your department names to match the real world. Another one reads, Pro, office small but well located, nice colleagues, very open-minded, friendly, professionals, easygoing. Cons, they do not provide working email. It is up to the employee to provide/create an email account to sync agendas and to access all the platforms they use for work. They strongly ask employees to clean the HQ office, including hoovering the floor, dusting off, and cleaning the toilet. I was very uncomfortable doing this. When confronted, they answer that it's normal that each one working in the office contribute to the cleaning. Small family-owned business, zero opportunity of growth. Salary offered is the legal minimum, no matter the role you hired for, age, or experience. Pro, nice customer base, good pay, staff discount, fun sales team. Con, the whole management structure is set to serve upper management's emotional regulation needs with little to no regard for an actual performance on the shop floor. Infantilizing and gaslighting were a norm. Bizarre expectations to perform enthusiasm for upper management. Instructions were vapid, general, and verbal without any actual clear guidelines. Clarifying or follow-up questions were received as a challenge to authority. Entire feedback structure is also based on self-assessment that later on is discussed, which is fine in principle, but here used to further the control of employees. The company advertised to be a POC, queer, and neurodivergent friendly, but was anything in my personal experience. Instead of focusing on rotating sales team simply for not being a yes person or fitting exactly in a parasocial role chosen by the upper management, maybe time to shake up directional structures. Pros, central location, employee discount. Cons, roles tend to be changed almost weekly. Yeah, heads of a company are strangely disconnected. Wages and benefits as if they're good, while in reality they're just checking the boxes that the law requires. I felt like they mostly hope that non-Dutch people who apply for jobs see these things as extras while they aren't. Much of the inclusiveness this company praises itself for is performative and felt like self-congratulating. While it is queer-owned, there was still a lot of negativity around gender expression and neurodivergency. Pay people more than the bare minimum if you're expecting them to go above and beyond in their work. Pro, team is so diverse and international, makes it fun to work with. Con, there's so many changes that bring feelings of uncertainty and concern, particularly when it affects the structure and organization of the workplace. All of these reviews are from February 2026 or earlier, so it's not people review bombing after the podcast episode or anything like that. Obviously, I don't know the credibility of these reviews, but just in this small sample, you see an overall trend of toxic work culture, hierarchy, and poor administration. I've never worked at Stephen and Penelope, but I have worked a few hospitality and retail roles in Amsterdam, and I've supported similar small family-owned, queer-owned businesses. It is an unfortunate trend across many businesses in Amsterdam that they will intentionally hire foreign staff such as like immigrant students and even refugees. So people who really need the money, but they don't really know their rights under Dutch labor laws in order to get away with underpaying and overworking them. My last manager who I worked under was working a consistent 60 hours a week, which is illegal. It's too much. This other business I was supporting, I was going there for lessons. A teacher was getting paid 17 euros an hour while an intern working under that teacher was getting paid 20. You know why? Because the teacher was Mexican. The intern was Dutch. The intern was therefore more knowledgeable about Dutch labor rights and had more of a safety net, so she was paid more. This happens a lot, unfortunately. I'm overheating. Things like paid lunch breaks, free meal during your shift, paid vacation leave, holiday bonuses. These are either mandatory or a common courtesy, but like that reviewer said, they're often disguised as like these special exclusive perks that you won't get anywhere else in order to sugarcoat how toxic a workplace can be. And since these employees, they don't speak Dutch, they don't have degrees, and it's not plausible to return to their home countries for whatever reason, and they've already formed bonds with their colleagues because their colleagues are also in similar living situations, they stay. They have nowhere to go other than other similar shitty businesses that are going to exploit them just the same. And whilst being exploited at these workplaces, they're also acting as a front, at least in roles that are customer facing, because by virtue of having very diverse looking staff, it makes your business look good. It looks like, oh, look at this wonderful small business owner hiring all these like poor marginalized people, giving them employment opportunities. It must be such a good business. I'm gonna support them and vouch for them. All the while, their staff are being treated like dog shit. And I'm not declaring that that's what Stephen and Penelope are doing. I'm saying that labor exploitation is very common in the Amsterdam city center. I've shown the reviews that attest to the exact opposite of what their website values are, and it's just something else to think about. Perhaps the staff negligence can actually vouch for Stephen's claim that he didn't know about Neil. Hypothetically, if Stephen is outsourcing all of the research work and his staff are like burnt out and they're always shifting so they don't really know what's going on, well, it's actually believable that nobody on his team nor himself actually knew about Blocked-Mag. Or conspiracy theory, I don't know, somebody working for Westnitz, resentful of the way they and their colleagues were being treated, intentionally sabotaged him by setting him up for this podcast. No, I don't actually believe in that. Ignore me. Hi guys, it's the next day and there's been some updates. Yesterday, Tuesday, both Stephen and Malia, who is the second co-founder of Stephen and Penelope, issued new statements. Stephen posts on his Westnitz Instagram page, "I've heard the call from people wanting me to clarify my position on the right-wing knitter I allowed to interview me this past weekend. This man is vile. His posts and beliefs are outright lies and propaganda, and the harm he has caused people in our community makes me deeply ashamed. I didn't know who he was when he approached me at my booth at Textile in Manchester. When he emailed me requesting an interview, he shared his YouTube channel and the Shauna Stitches social media, neither of which showed the deeply hateful content I have since found on his personal profiles. But that's exactly the point. All it took was a basic search to find his bigoted posts, and particularly his harassment of women of color in our community. I should have done that minimum due diligence. I didn't, and I am ashamed of the association I allowed as a result. This was irresponsible, and I apologize for the harm it caused, especially to those who have been directly targeted by his behavior. I clearly haven't been vocal enough about where I stand politically and socially. If I had been, this man would never have felt comfortable approaching me in the first place. Silence on these issues is not neutrality. It creates a space for exactly this kind of assumption. Let me be clear, there is no place for racism, sexism, homophobia, or transphobia in our community. I also want to apologize sincerely to Malia and to my staff at Westnitz and Stephen and Penelope. I caused this. The stress and fallout this created for all of you was unfair, and I'm truly sorry for it. I spent this past weekend reading your messages, posts, and emails. I understand the serious weight of this mistake. As someone with influence in this community, I have a responsibility to be far more careful about who I appear with and what that communicates. I left the comments open, but I will not tolerate any hate speech. Please don't defend me. Comments with blind support for me that minimize my actions may be deleted. I made this mistake. I own it fully, and I'm truly sorry." And Malia posted to the Stephen and Penelope page, "To our customers, friends, and colleagues, I want to clarify my position and Stephen and Penelope's position on the podcast appearance Stephen made this past weekend. As a queer Indigenous person partnered with a transhuman, the views held by the man who interviewed Stephen affect me personally and deeply. People like him are part of why my partner and I cannot simply exist in the world without being made to feel unsafe and at times in genuine danger. If you know me, you know that advocacy for marginalized people is not new for me. I have long stood alongside trans people, people of color, and victims of genocide, and that will not change. I gave Stephen the space to make his own apology both for Westnitz and for his stake in Stephen and Penelope. But I also have to take responsibility. It was not solely on Stephen to vet who he was speaking to. I didn't check. I didn't catch it, and I should have. That's on me too. Past few days have been hard. I felt genuinely disappointed in my friend and colleague, both for this mistake and for a reticence to be publicly vocal about his values. To anyone who has been feeling similarly, I'm sorry it took me a few days to move through the initial panic and get here. I wish I had responded sooner and more clearly. Stephen and Penelope began as just me in a tiny shop and has grown steadily over 17 years through hard work, patience, and a lot of luck. We don't have PR people, and our marketing staff, like the rest of us, are creatives, art school graduates, and lovers of craft, doing their best in an increasingly difficult world. We may not be loudly vocal about every global issue, but our values are not a secret. They are liberal, they are human, and they are consistent. Comments are closed on this post. I won't host a space where people are directed here to spread hate, argue with each other, or offer defenses we don't need. Malia May Joseph. Stephen is currently turning comments on and off on a schedule on his new statement so that he can actively moderate them when they're open to prevent fights and people blindly defending him, as he said. I'm not going to pick apart these statements in this video. Some commenters are like, oh, what about anti-Semitism? Or like, you forgot to mention ableism. And I just no longer feel like that kind of nitpicking is productive. I don't think there's any more statements that Stephen can issue, or like an apology video, or more posting or less posting that can really help his case. I think only time will tell. I mean, we'll see if there's more patterns of this sort of behavior in the future. We'll see if employee ratings will go up. We'll see what kind of collaborations he takes on later. Most people are saying they do believe the collaboration was genuinely done on just like pure ignorance. And at this point, I think that's most plausible too. And people are saying they do see like valiant effort in Stephen navigating his mistake, but again, they need to witness some long-term consistent change. Stephen's claim in this new response that Neil approached him first at Textile and Manchester honestly gives rise to another theory, that Neil was intentionally sabotaging Stephen by befriending him and inviting him to the podcast because he knew that Stephen's association with him would ruin his business. It is true that Neil knew Stephen, as was proven by his remarks about the MCAL in 2023. I think I've also read out enough comments for this video. I just want to reiterate one thing I've said in a previous video. If you see all this hurt and outrage, and all you can say is, well, this doesn't affect me, I don't feel offended, therefore you guys are just insecure and overreacting, and you're all snowflakes and you're all jealous. It is not this gotcha moment. You're just projecting your own privilege and lack of empathy. Citing yourself, using personal anecdote as some sort of special exception is not an argument. It's logical fallacy. It's a failure to think abstractly. And frankly, it's just insensitive. And again, there's just more and more of this age-old, like, why can't we just love each other? Let's just sweep this under the rug. If you constantly avoid conflict and you tear down others for being engaged in conflict, you get nowhere. You learn nothing. We did not get trans healthcare or labor rights or women in the workforce with peace and love, by living and letting live. And I hope by now that I've built a smart community here on this channel who share that frustration regarding the constant trivialization and evasion of conflict, oh, this is a nothing burger, you'll live, it's not that deep. Way to just reveal your own lack of critical thinking. If you only speak your mind in order to deny or downplay somebody else's feelings, you're a shitty person. You can live and let live, be my guest. You are lucky enough that right-wing violence hasn't yet affected you, but the leopard will eat your face eventually. If you don't see systems of oppression at work, let alone understand how they work, you're likely sitting near or at the very top of that system. If you've never known discrimination or feelings of unsafety and dread due to fascism, well, now's not the time to be a storyteller. Now's the perfect time to sit down and listen to other marginalized voices speak without interrupting them or strawmanning them the way they so often are. I'm not asking y'all to boycott West Knits or never shop at Stephen and Penelope again. I'm not asking you guys to go and send hate to Stephen, okay? Criticism and hate are completely different things. Don't automatically assume that people criticizing him are just trying to ruin his name. Please, let's keep this as an ongoing conversation because, fascism is on the rise. There's much to say, there's much to do, and I'm just one person and I can never, perfectly articulate it. I'm grateful that with situations like this, there's at least an opportunity to talk about social issues in a manner that's hopefully, loaded with enough entertainment value that people sit and listen long enough for those social issues to be legitimized to them. Because it's easy to feel far removed until it's your favorite influencer. It's easy to feel bored about political conversations until it's internet drama. And this is an issue that, affects myself and my loved ones very, very deeply. I've witnessed a lot of violence. It's a way for me to talk about it as well without just completely trauma dumping on the internet. Yeah, I could sit here and ruminate for hours, but that's all I'm gonna say today. There's other activists out there, there's other creators, and I mean, we're all combating this literacy crisis. I mean, yeah, I'm done for date. I'm gonna stop recording. I want to end this video by saying that this is also a great illustration of why you shouldn't put creators on a pedestal or get overly parasocial. They are regular ass humans. They are not these perfect deities who can do no wrong. Nor are they static figures with unchangeable values. I say that Steven is knitting PewDiePie. PewDiePie is also just some dude. Don't idolize PewDiePie or Steven West or Clara Dow or Hank Green or me. It's for your own sake to not see some random person on the internet as this perfect parental figure or best friend or role model. Because what are you gonna do when they switch up? When the girl who supported small artists all of a sudden starts promoting AI, when the body positivity girl gets a boob job, or when they simply decide to leave the internet for personal reasons. Don't grieve them. Don't let that ruin your own outlook on life or affect your own values. I'm obviously talking about your attachment to the influencer and not about a disengagement to the broader issue that the influencer is contributing to. At the end of the day, influencing is a job. Entertainment is a service, and values are a trademark. The stripper doesn't like you, the therapist doesn't care about you, they're not your friends, you are a customer. Don't become codependent with somebody who you have a transactional relationship with. Also, don't randomly boycott someone or immediately jump to the worst possible negative conclusion over one remark they made with no further context, or they just said one word that they didn't realize was derogatory, because again, these are regular ass people. They're gonna make mistakes. They're not omniscient, and I'm talking to a cracked fucking iPhone right now, and I have to stop every 15 minutes in order to export stuff because it's constantly on low storage space, so I never reach flow state. So often people will criticize influencers, they'll nitpick apology videos being like, oh, this person's body language is so fake, his mannerisms are off, this looks really staged and performative. Most people on the internet are talking to metal fucking blocks, inanimate objects. Of course it's gonna be fake and staged and performative. Please take everything on the internet with a grain of salt. While I can't say whether Steven was lying or not about Neil's values, I am appalled that you wouldn't just do a quick Google search about somebody you're gonna go on a whole ass podcast with, as somebody with 350,000 followers. As for the disabling of comments, what happens with these controversies is people tend to dogpile. The more upset comments there are, the more likely it is for more people to leave upset comments of their own, and it tends to just snowball. There's always those people who also get really toxic and then start just attacking somebody's appearance or attacking shit that's completely irrelevant. Leaving comments open would also draw more attention to Neil's page, unfortunately, and I'm fully aware that this video is going to do the same. That's kind of just the crux of public commentary. At the same time, disabling comments is just never a good look, and it can be a way to smokescreen the secondary or actual motive of avoiding accountability.
In doing that, in appearing on a podcast with a fascist, and then when you receive criticism about that, you turn off the comments so you don't have to listen to it. You are uplifting fascist voices and diminishing the voices of people who are affected actively by fascism.
And continuing to post can make it look like, oh, you're just trying to push that statement further down your page in order to sweep it under the rug. If you do a period of inactivity after a controversy, it could harm your business, and silence can also be perceived as avoidance, but it could also communicate that the situation has affected you deeply and you're going through a period of reflection, and going back to just regularly scheduled programming can be just as harmful to your business. The internet is a very brutal place. Finding the right means of damage control is difficult and often impossible once you do slip up. So you gotta choose between an overwhelming amount of hate and criticism across a platform you've looked really hard to build, or look like a coward. But you, again, wouldn't be in this situation if you just did some research. I don't think that his MCAL in 2023 was some sort of intentional dog whistle. As somebody who plays Minecraft, I can vouch for the fact that a swastika, it's a geometric shape. It's a window with missing lines. It's very easy to accidentally construct. As for the multiple cease and desists, I do not fuck with that. Like I said before, sending a legal threat over something that's not only completely legal, but does not put a dent in your business is, honestly, I think it's kind of embarrassing. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's ethical, of course, but reselling stuff, I think trying to punish people for reselling your stuff when they're literally your supporters because they bought that stuff in the first place, it just puts you in a shittier situation than if you were just to let people do that. Tell me what you guys think of this situation. As usual, please keep it civil. I know some of y'all are worried about me because I'm not uploading. I appreciate your concern. It's not because I'm dead or anything. I had to foster a severely disabled pigeon, and I've been working on a pattern, so that's why I haven't been uploading. But there will be new content coming soon. So thank you guys for watching all the way through, and I will see you in the next one.